Hey friends, welcome back to the Big Talk podcast. I'm your host, Tricia Brouk, founder of the Big Talk Academy, award-winning director, producer, and author. And this is episode 533. In today's episode, I am talking to the amazing Ellen Yin. Ellen is a speaker, a course creator, and the founder of Cubicle to CEO. Her own Cubicle to CEO journey began when she quit her corporate marketing job without a backup plan. And to date, she has mentored over 10,000 students through her online programs. You can catch her every week on the Cubicle to CEO podcast, where she shares the stories of women owned and women led businesses. All right, everybody, let's do this. Ellen, I am so excited to have you on the show. Welcome to the Big Talk podcast.
Hi, Tricia. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I always like to invite my guests to take us back in time and to share their backstory with us. The reason that I think this isn't so important is because we know who you are now. We see everything that you're doing in the world. And that's the same thing that happens in a play when you read a character's through line, their story in a play. And I always like to think about their backstory in preparation. So, can you take us back as far as you like to what led you to be here with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my love for storytelling and writing started as a young child. I was that kid who read voraciously and was always had my nose in a book. But as far as what led me to this career, it's quite an unplanned path. I always thought I was going to have a career in broadcast journalism. That was my big dream. And I had no intention of being a business owner or entrepreneur in any sense of the word. I don't even think I fully understood what a path like that would even look like when I entered college. But life took me in a bunch of directions. I actually ended up graduating with a degree in exercise sports science or kinesiology at some schools. And that was a decision that, was birthed from this passion for fitness and lifting that I discovered while I was in college. And I didn't plan to professionally use that degree and become like a physical therapist or anything like that, but it did lead me to landing an internship at a fitness startup where I took on the role of PR and marketing lead. And so that was my kind of first foray into business, working at a startup and starting to see all of these possibilities. And then,
Ellen, before you continue, I'd love for you to share what college you're talking about and what the startup is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I originally went to USC in LA for my freshman year. Then I transferred to Oregon State University in my hometown of Corvallis, Oregon. That's where I graduated from. And so go Beavs if anyone's in the Pac-12. And then the company that I got that internship at was a company called Ledbetter. And I pitched myself for that internship. They didn't have a program or anything. I just said, hey, can I work for you for free for 10 hours a week, write blogs, create YouTube videos, and then if there's value there, would you be willing to consider potentially expanding that role to a paid position? And that's really what led me to getting a full-time position with them after graduation. And from there on out, after graduation, all of my my professional work has always been in marketing. And so I actually ended up getting laid off from that job about a year after I started. They totally restructured their company, let go of almost all their staff. And that was a hard moment for me because again, like I didn't have my mind on being an entrepreneur even at that moment in time. And I just really loved working in a role that allowed me to play with
Mhm.
creativity. And so the next marketing job that I got was actually at a healthcare company and specifically on the health insurance side. And so, as you can imagine, that role was pretty much the opposite of creativity. It was very stifling, a lot of rules and regulations in that industry around what you can and cannot say. And so, immediately, it felt like the wrong fit for me. And so, I was only in that job for about 10 months when I quit without a backup plan. I was 23 years old. It was a couple days before Christmas. I had no idea what was going to happen next. In my mind at the time when I left, I thought I'll move to a bigger market. I'll continue applying for marketing roles and I'll hopefully land at another company that better cultivates that creativity in me. And, uh, you know, life took me a different direction. I ended up landing a freelance marketing client. It was these two local coffee stands. They paid me $300 And it just blew open my mind and made me realize, oh my goodness, I have a skill set that can be monetizable outside of a traditional job structure. So I just ran with it, Trisha. And as they say, the rest is history. 5+ years later, here we are in my current business, and our business model has evolved significantly since then. So we're now a media company. Cubicle, the CEO, is. But it all started with that first $300 project, and showing me a possibility I hadn't imagined for myself before.
I love it. How did you have so much confidence at 23 to be able to leave your position and to not have a backup plan?
Sometimes I think that, especially when we're young, confidence can be easily substituted for a naivete. So it's
Yes.
probably a little bit of both. I really felt that it was one of those situations where a lot of well-meaning people in my life, including my own parents, were advising me against making that choice because they felt that it was a unnecessary risk, and that it would make more sense for me to stay a certain length of time so that there wasn't this weird jump on my resume, and also, line up another job before you quit this one. Well, thank goodness, of course, I didn't follow that advice, because had I lined up another job, I never would have had that space to have landed that freelance client, right? I wouldn't have been available for that. So I think part of the confidence did come from just knowing that staying longer in something that isn't meant for you isn't necessarily going to change anything about how you feel in a certain situation. And also knowing that, for me, this is unique to my story, so I realize not everybody has the luxury or the privilege of just up and quitting something when they feel like it's no longer serving them. But for me, I was, like you said, I was very young at the time, so I had no responsibilities to anyone but myself. And I had also made a series of decisions over my college career that allowed me to graduate debt free. So that was also a huge thing that made me feel comfortable making that risk, because I didn't really owe anything outside of, just normal living bills, and I felt like I had enough of a savings built up to sustain me for a few months if needed.
That's amazing. And I also think that that comes with the knowing you knew that there was more for you
Mhm.
and the connection to creativity.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about what creativity means to you and
Mm.
has it evolved?
Oh, that's a great question. Creativity to me is being able to dream and innovate and experience without limitations. So I think for me, creativity is a lot about being in the actual action. So, n- imagination, of course, is a huge thing. Dreaming is a huge thing, but I feel like I am the most creative, or get the most out of creativity, when I'm actually taking steps to do the thing, even if I don't know all of the uh, what all of the rules are, or what of all of the steps are ahead of time. So that to me is really creativity. And as far as if it's changed over time, I think, a lot of times, I don't know if this is necessarily about how I view creativity differently, but more so just whenever you're starting a new thing or imagining a new thing for yourself, like I was, at 23, 5 years ago, looking at, oh, I have this new client. Should I stop applying for jobs and just start getting more clients? When you're at the precipice of any new thing, you're in this unique position where your dreams only extend as far as your lived experience in that particular moment. So, no matter how big you dream, in some way or another, it is by default a little bit limited in what you've been exposed to. So, if you asked 23-year-old me, what is the biggest dream you could have? I don't think I could have ever, even if I had wanted to, verbalize where we are today, because I just didn't have that exposure or that knowledge of what was possible. So I guess when I look at creativity and how it evolves over time, it's really about, as you continue to put yourself in unfamiliar or perhaps even uncomfortable situations to grow and learn as a person, your your worldview of what's possible expands, and therefore your creativity expands with it.
I love that so much, Ellen. I mean, you think about the Wright brothers, you think about NASA, right? We couldn't have imagined flying or going to the moon until someone did it. We
Yeah.
couldn't have imagined having a computer the size of a deck of cards.
Right.
until someone did it. So I think that expansion and innovation of creativity is so powerful. How would you express to our listeners and our audience how to move beyond what is our lived experience so that we can move into like massive creativity?
Oh, I love this. Well, I really think that is the power of storytelling, right? Like what you and I are doing here. Perhaps someone's listening on the other end and they're hearing this story and thinking, oh, like I didn't even know that XYZ, maybe a small nugget of what we shared was something that's new to them, right? New information. And so I think that's why I was so drawn to books as a child, because through books, you get to live a million lives that you've never actually lived yourself, right? You get to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And that's why I'm so passionate about the work that I do now with Cubicle to CEO as a media company. We exist as a platform to elevate the voices in business media that are traditionally underrepresented. So, especially women and women of color. And we want to tell the stories of bootstrap business owners who are making, 6, 7, 8 figures a year. And while that may seem like a huge deal to some of us listening to this, to traditional business media, they don't care, right? They're talking about venture backed companies. They're talking about, the next Steve Jobs. They're not focused necessarily on the range of stories that we exist to tell on our platform. And so I think the best way people can expose themselves to new lived experiences is to tune in to content like what you're creating or like what we're creating at Cubicle to CEO, and really try to see people's perspectives from different backgrounds or different interests, different industries. I think that's another huge thing is, especially in business, it can be very easy to silo yourself in a tunnel vision of only what's happening inside your own bubble. But I find some of my best ideas and inspiration come from people who work in completely different industries to what I do.
Absolutely, for sure. I love everything that you're saying about being in environments that are not the same as yours.
Hmm.
And because and we talk about this a lot at the Big Talk, if we all have the same opinions, we're not going to get anywhere. If we all
Hmm.
think the same thing, we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So being able to really innovate and be as creative as possible by having other people who are different from you around you all the time, wow, that's the exciting part, because you're going to get a point of view that you couldn't think of because it's not in your brain.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. And I think that's true both in your online consumption of content as well as who you choose to spend time with in person, right? And again, it comes back to um, that willingness to live in discomfort sometimes and maybe be around people whose ideas and opinions challenge yours and maybe are uncomfortable for you. But I think if you stay open and you stay curious, which is my other, personal superpower, I think being curious and being creative, if you can stay curious rather than judgmental, you will learn so much that, it's such a blessing. It's such a gift.
It is a gift. It is a gift, Ellen. I love also that you said you couldn't have imagined where you are today and at 23. Talk to us about when that spark was ignited, about where you are today and what you're doing and the contribution that you're making, not only to women in media and women of color in media, but these small companies. And at what point did you decide I'm going to be the one to amplify these voices?
Oh my goodness. Well, I don't think I had a singular point in time that triggered that spark necessarily. I think it's like many things in life, I think it's a gradual build. You start trying one thing and it leads to another and another and another, and everything it builds on itself and it becomes this snowball, and pretty soon you just find yourself caught up in the momentum of it. And so I think my first foray into media as far as my own business was when I started my podcast, Cubicle to CEO, in the summer of 2019. And at that time, I had no intention of creating a media company. I was still very much in the trenches of scaling my marketing agency. And I just thought that the podcast would be a fun space to play for me to meet people that inspired me and to have, quality conversations like with people like you. And so I didn't really think about what the potential for the podcast could be. It truly was just I like to talk to people, so let me create a platform and invite people to come chat with me. So over time, I really started to see the impact of how the interviews we were having on our show were actually creating tangible change in the lives of our listeners. You know, we would start getting messages from really all over the world. I remember the first time it really shook me was when I got a message from a young woman in, I think it was Nigeria, who said, I listened to a podcast and I, you know, in my village, most women don't even complete a high school education. They never go to college. I am the first person in my family that is trying to get a higher education. And because of your podcast, I decided to start a small business while I'm doing this. And she went on to tell me all the things about, you know, what she's creating. And I just thought, this is insane. Like, what a time we live in where we are able to reach someone from across an ocean that we have no reason to ever cross paths with unless it was through something like this. And the fact that she is actually creating a, you know, a different reality for herself and thereby changing the legacy of her, not only her own life, but I'm sure the lives of her family or her community. It's a ripple effect, and I think that's what's so powerful to me.
Oh my gosh, that story is incredible, Ellen.
Thank
When we
you.
hear those stories of people who we've touched, and clearly you have a massive reach with your podcast and now your platform, being able to show up like that for other people, isn't that why you get up in the morning?
Absolutely. I mean, it's I don't know about you, but I, you know, whenever I get a lovely note of encouragement from someone in our community, I screenshot it, I save it to a special folder, and I think inevitably there are lots of ups and downs in building a business, and sometimes you can be very discouraged or very just drained. You know, it's not all fun all the time, but I think when you reach those moments, you look back and you give yourself that reminder of, okay, this is why I showed up to do what I'm doing today, and you may not see the results of it every single moment, every single day, or even week or month. But when you look back collectively over time, the impact is truly enormous.
It is enormous, and I love that you're pointing out what we often say here is that if you reach one person, you have done your job.
Yeah, so true, so true.
And
I
so
love that.
the collective of who you're reaching is enormous, to
Mm.
use your amazing word.
Yes, 100%. And I think to your point, it's also a reminder that if truly in the totality of what you do on this earth only reaches, only I say in quotes, reaches one person, like truly one individual, we often forget that one individual has other individuals that they meet and connect with, which naturally also alter the course of their lives. And I know it's that like butterfly effect phenomenon, right? And whether or not you believe in that theory, I think it is just a reminder that your direct contact has other amplifying effects that you may never even see or be consciously aware of.
So true. And I think that's something to highlight for the listeners is you may not know who you're reaching or who is being reached because of the person you are reaching, which
Yes.
is why it's so important to show up fully present, authentic, truthful, and to decide whether or not you're going to contribute love, hate, good, or evil.
Mm, yeah. 100%. I love the way that you phrase that. You don't know who you're reaching through who you've already reached. Oh, that's so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. I would love to know more about your media company. Let's talk a little bit of how you support these small, amazing business owners.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, our particular niche, for lack of a better word, is we're really focused on telling the stories of women owned, women led businesses that are self funded and making between $100,000 and $100 million a year. So that may seem like a wide range because we cover all industries, but it's truly actually a very small sector, small in terms of coverage in the media on you know, the amazing individuals who are making a huge impact, an enormous impact, like we've been saying, on their own communities through the work that they do every day in these small again in quotation businesses. So we do that primarily through our podcast, through Cubicle the CEO. So we publish twice a week. On Mondays, we bring on a guest, and our tagline for our show is that we ask successful entrepreneurs the business questions you can't Google. So
Mm.
most of the time, what makes our listeners, you know, drawn to our podcast or that we've heard in our feedback is that we're not necessarily asking our guests to come on and share their area of expertise that they've regurgitated, a million times on other shows. Instead, we're asking them to present one specific strategy that they're actually implementing behind the scenes in their own business in real time. And we're asking them to be financially transparent with sharing how that strategy has impacted their business, the real numbers behind those decisions, the good, the bad, the lessons. And our listeners get to essentially shortcut the learning curve by borrowing what already works in proven businesses. And so that's kind of the premise of our Monday interviews. And then on Wednesdays, I get to just sit solo behind the mic and kind of riff on whatever's happening in my journey as a founder, like what I'm experiencing, what I'm thinking, what we're trying. And those are really fun because those feel like personal conversations with a friend. So that's kind of our show premise. And our other major content platform is our free weekly newsletter that gets sent out on Wednesdays to, tens of thousands of inboxes. And in that newsletter, we're here to again share financially transparent insights from 6, 7, and 8 figure businesses that you can't find anywhere else.
This is so valuable. I love this. When you first started asking your guests to come on and be transparent about their financials, was that difficult for them?
I think for a lot of people, it can be. I think we've been very lucky that most of our guests are quite willing to step beyond maybe what they've even shared before on their own platforms in service of understanding that the information they share um, helps all of us, but especially women, normalize the conversation around money. And our goal with having people be so transparent is that we collectively raise our financial IQ, right? Because you can't intelligently navigate things that you have no information about, right? And it's very difficult, honestly, to find information about what real businesses in certain industries are charging, spending, profiting. And so we just want to add to that collective knowledge around businesses run and funded by women. So that's it's been interesting, but I think that over time, as we continue to um, not only advocate for our guests to do that, but as we exemplify that through our own work, we've now for over 4 years shared our business income reports publicly on the podcast every single quarter. So every 90 days, I come on the show and I share exactly what our business is making, spending, and profiting. And by leading by example, I think it makes others feel more comfortable showing up and sharing because it's not like we go to the extremes and we literally share like it's as if you're looking at our business books, right? So you can see every detail, but we don't require, of course, that our guests share on that level if that's not something they're comfortable with. But I think any amount of transparency just fosters really quality conversations that do make a difference.
I could not agree more. And I also think what you're touching on goes back to creativity and innovation. If your guests are modeling it's possible to make $100 million to
Yeah.
fit within your framework of who you serve, then anybody can.
Yes. Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. I was just speaking at an event earlier this year hosted by the Kendra Scott Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute at UT Austin. And one of the things that Kendra always says is if you can see her, you can be her. And I really just believe in the power of that message. Or if you can hear her, you can be her, right? If you can, whatever it is, but just being in the presence of people who have done it before makes you feel like it's possible for you to do it too, because there's an actual path for, achieving said thing that's been carved out already.
Absolutely. Kendra Scott, the shoe designer.
Kendra Scott, the jewelry designer. Close. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Amazing. I love all of this. And I also think you being so willing to share your business financials with your listeners, it's like a masterclass in how to be a founder and a successful CEO.
A little bit. Yeah. It is very, it's like I kind of joke that it's like having a reality show, but through a mic, right? And it's a fun way to document not only for others, but also honestly, even for myself. I go back and I listen to, let's say, an income report that I did in 2019, and it's so interesting. I mean, 2019 to now, it's not the hugest gap of years, but even within those few years, the amount of growth and how much my perspective of things have changed is quite astounding. I think entrepreneur years are a lot like dog years. Like you live 7 years in 1 year, and so it's cool to be able to look back and really actually see the tangible growth. And I'm not just talking about monetary, but truly the internal growth that happens in documenting and processing all this information in real time and then getting to reflect back on it years later.
Absolutely. Analysis is so important.
Yes.
How do you find guests for your show, for your media platform?
So most of the time, it's kind of a combination of two things. I think probably about half the guests we actually reach out to and we select for a very specific reason. And then the other half is sorting through all the incredible submissions that we get for our show. So we get hundreds of pitches, as you can imagine. And it's so hard because you want to tell everyone's story, but you also have to be selective in how you're using your platform to amplify different stories, right? And different voices and perspectives. And so it's been kind of a duality in that.
Amazing. Well, I have a feeling you're going to have a lot of submissions after this podcast interview.
I sure hope so. And if you're curious about how to send a brilliant podcast pitch that will actually get your pitch read and responded to, I actually wrote a full line by line template. Perfect podcast pitch is what it's called. So if you're wanting that resource, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram.
Amazing. And we can also put that in the show notes if you like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just ellenyin.com/perfect podcast pitch.
Amazing. That is so, so fabulous. All right. Are you ready for some fast talk?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, Ellen, what's your favorite book? I know this is going to be a hard question for you.
So I actually don't have a favorite book because I've read so many and taken away, different insights. What I'm currently reading, I have two that I'm currently reading. The Genius Zone by Gay Hendricks. And on audio, I've been listening to Kendra Scott's Born to Shine.
Amazing. Who is your favorite speaker and why?
This may surprise you, but my favorite speaker is not someone that is categorized as a speaker typically, Taylor Swift. Um, I think Taylor is through every aspect of her work, but especially if you've ever heard her speak, and she recently gave the commencement at NYU for their graduates. She's so intentional about every word that is said, and she weaves storytelling so masterfully through every medium, whether it's songwriting or speaking to a crowd of thousands. And so, if you've never heard her speak, it's actually quite a great masterclass in kind of seeing how someone communicates and connects so deeply on a large scale.
I agree completely. She's masterful. When she speaks on her documentary and when she speaks publicly, I could not agree more. I'm so glad you brought that to our attention.
Yeah.
How do you memorize?
I don't know that I have a practice around memorizing. I think for me, repetition is obviously key, but I actually do have quite a good memory when just visually like reading something in my head. So I don't have to necessarily say things out loud to memorize certain things. But memorization is such a small part of the work that I do. So I don't know that I have a key tip here.
Okay, that's fair. I think you nailed it though. Repetition is everything,
Yes.
for
Yes.
sure. What do you do the day before you speak, Ellen?
Oh, well, lately, the day before I speak, I'm usually traveling to said place to speak. So I'm often on a plane. But honestly, I really like um, to journal and read. I think it's such a great way to decompress your mind, to not hyper focus on necessarily what you're going to say, because at that point, hopefully, you're already prepared for whatever it is that you're presenting. I think it's great to just let your mind have a little bit of escape before you speak.
Such great advice. And what podcast are you currently obsessed with?
Oh my goodness, there's a lot that I listen to that are very industry specific to media, so I won't necessarily bore you with those if you're not part of this industry. But one of the general entrepreneurship podcasts that I've been really enjoying lately is the Crazy Ones, hosted by Alex Lieberman and Jesse Pujji, and it's a morning brew podcast.
Amazing. And we'll put all of these links in the show notes so you can certainly get access. Thank you so much, Ellen, for being a featured guest today on The Big Talk. Where can our listeners get in touch with you and DM you?
Thank you, Tricia. This has been an absolute pleasure. You're an amazing interviewer. You can connect with me on Instagram at Miss Ellen Yin personally, or with our brand at Cubicle to CEO. My team runs that account, but I am on there from time to time. So I'd love to connect both places. And then otherwise, catch us every Monday on the podcast, Cubicle to CEO.
Amazing. I'm so grateful to you and everyone who's tuning in. Thank you so much for dropping in with us here. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get access to all the latest videos. And remember, everybody, your voice matters. Big love.